Hi, everybody. I'm Julia Hicks DePeister, and I just want to welcome you. We're going to let people get into the meeting, but as a former WEF board member and a career coach, I'm just really glad to see you here. So thanks so much for making time in your evening. And we'll probably get started at about 7:35. So just wanted to kind of set expectations there. You can see our panelists on the screen. We should all be there. All Wellesley High School graduates. And so we'll be on in a few moments. Thanks. Hi, for those who've just joined, I'm Julia Hicks DePeister, and we're just letting the attendees come in, but you'll see on your screen the panelists. This event's being produced by the Wellesley Education Foundation, and we're grateful that they found our panelists, and we'll be on starting shortly. We'll try and kick off right at 7:35. So there'll be a little bit of a delay, but we're just letting people get into the Zoom. Thanks. All right, well, I'm going to get going. We're up to, I would call a quorum. And so welcome. Thanks so much for attending. I know most of you are probably Wellesley High School students, parents, and or staff and faculty. And then I know a few people are from outside schools. And thank you so much for participating in this evening. One thing I wanted to start with is just describing the work of Wellesley Education Foundation. As you all probably know, Wellesley Education Foundation has been around for 35 years, and they are the screen for the Wellesley Spelling Bee. But we also put small events like this together to try and really connect learning with the broader community. So what I would like to just share about WEF this year, and the numbers keep growing, so I just want to read a little bit about WEF to you. I'm sure you know that Wellesley has been doing a viral testing program, and that certainly is STEM in action. And we have received $600,000 in support from WEF for the viral testing program. So that is a significant amount of money. And in addition to helping Wesleyan students and faculty and staff, I would say the other benefit to this is just contributing to the scientific inquiry, public health campaign that works effectively, in our case, in the state of. Another thing that WEF will be doing this spring is, in addition to that money, they'll be giving $80,000 out in educator grants. This is something that they do annually, and a lot of effort is put requesting these grants from our faculty members and staff, in addition to having this money be dispersed in a really effective way, and then measuring the outcomes from these grants. So the other thing that WEF is working on is See Yourself in STEM, working on it, who is our Director of DEI, Diversity, Equity, and the See Yourself in STEM program is ongoing throughout the month of April. So I will have in the chat area for everybody a link if you're liking what you hear here, or if you haven't made your contribution for this year. But I really just encourage everybody to increase. I'm going to move right over to our panelists. And so we're going to go in chronological order. I'm not going to say much because they've prepared some remarks. And so we're really lucky to have Forrest up, and he was a 2010 graduate of Wellesley High School. And so Forrest, take it away. All right, I'm going to mute myself and you can unmute yourself.
So hi, everyone, and thanks to WEF for having me. My name is Forrest Gasdia, and I'm the oldest one on the panel. But ironically, I think I'm also the only one who's still a full-time student. So I did a Bachelor's of Science in Engineering Physics with a concentration in space systems at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Florida. But I love research, and I did not feel at all done with learning. And although learning never really ends, attending classes lets you learn things very densely and directly. So I went straight into a master's in engineering physics, where my thesis was on optical tracking and characterization of small satellites. I'm currently at University of Colorado Boulder, where I earned a second master's degree in aerospace engineering, and I'm just a few months away from completing a PhD in aerospace as well. But that's all the academics I can take for the time being, so I expect to move into applied research and development next. Much of what I do is somewhere between science and engineering. I often have some motivation, sometimes pure science, sometimes fully applied, to solve a particular problem or make a difficult measurement that doesn't have a standard engineering solution. So as an example, my PhD research involves trying to observe the lower charged regions of Earth's upper atmosphere indirectly using very long radio waves. And such observations allow us to answer science questions about that region of the atmosphere and its interaction with radiation belts and other phenomena, but it could also be used to improve communication or navigation systems using these very long radio waves. So all of this involves aspects of signal processing and statistical estimation, electromagnetics, space and plasma physics, all interwoven. Now, looking at WHS's website in preparation for tonight, I was amazed to see how many more STEM opportunities there are now compared to 10 or 11 years ago. And I think I was solidly prepared entering into college as a STEM major, and it seems like things have only gotten better since I was at WHS. I've chatted with a few college friends, including some from WHS, and I have many pieces of advice I've made note of, but I'm really eager to get into the questions. So I guess I'll pass this back to Julia to introduce Billy.
Thanks so much, Forrest. Really appreciate that. And next up is Billy Kaplan, 2013 WHS grad. Thanks, Billy.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, my name is Billy, and I'm currently located in New York City. So I apologize if there's any like loud street noise. It's not quite as idyllic as Wellesley. I was born and raised in Wellesley. I went to Hardy Elementary School, then to the middle school, and then to the high school. So I feel like I'm maybe not an expert on Wellesley public schools, but definitely a product of them. And I think that they're really good at what they do. I think when you leave the Wellesley public schools, you'll be ahead of students from other schools in terms of what you know. Um, you'll have a really good ability to learn new things. And I think you'll also have some experience dealing with stress, which is not always the best thing, but definitely part of the experience. And you'll also have some teachers that will change your life. I think probably we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. And I'd also say that the Wellesley Public Schools have an amazing ecosystem of students, lots of really hardworking and motivated students. And being in that sort of environment, I think encourages you to work harder and to learn more and to try to become better at yourself. So that's like a little bit of positive peer pressure. And I'd also want to note that even though it might feel stressful in the moment while you're at high school, looking back now, I can't believe it's already been 8 years, but it's like all those moments of stress have kind of melted away and I'm left with just fuzzy, nostalgic memories and mostly happy ones, which I'm glad to say. So that was like my Wellesley Public School experience. And then I left the high school in 2013. I went to Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee to study biomedical engineering. And along the way at college, I realized that I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do biomedical engineering, so I made some switches. I eventually ended up with a degree in chemical engineering, but realized while I was even getting that degree that I actually wanted to do computer programming. So I ended up taking some online classes, and when I was in my senior year of college and deciding what I wanted to do next, I ended up just applying to a bunch of tech companies. And I eventually ended up working as a software developer at Amazon in Seattle. And I think one of the other panelists is about to move to Seattle, so he's got that to look forward to. I only lasted there for about a year before moving to New York City to attend this program called the Recurse Center, which is a self-directed retreat where you can pretty much learn whatever you want. It's really cool. I would love to talk more about that. And now I work as a software engineer at a small healthcare startup, writing Ruby code, making this web app for people who help other people in the community, which I'm pretty passionate about. And we've also been asked to talk about some things we do for fun. I like rock climbing. I like obsessing over ferns. I think ferns are really cool. And I like to explore New York City. Yeah, that's all there is about me. I'll pass it back to Julia.
That's great. I like ferns too. We'll have to have a sidebar on that one. Susan Roberts, I'd love you to talk. And Susan is a 2014 graduate of Wellesley High.
So I'm Susan. I went to Northeastern University and I studied chemistry there. In Northeastern, for anyone who isn't familiar, they have their co-op program where you take 6 months off of school and you work full time for 6 months instead of just like a 4-month or 3-month summer internship. So I did one of my co-ops at a pharma company in Cambridge, realized pharma is not for me. And my second co-op was at a food manufacturer where I was doing more food chemistry, food science. So I stuck to the chemistry, graduated with a BS in chemistry, and from connections at my second co-op, got my current job where I'm working in R&D for food manufacturing. Partway into that, I went to part-time and I went to pastry school actually in Cambridge, and have been using that to help at my job currently. So a little mix of science and culinary work.
Great, thanks, Susan. Taylor Bronstein, would you please share your background, 2015 WHS grad?
Sure. Hi, I'm Taylor Bronstein. I graduated in 2015. I went to Vassar College in Poughkeepsie, New York. And so I guess in high school, I thought that I wanted to be pre-med going into college, and that I think I had in my mind that I wanted to do sports medicine. And I'll tell you now, that's not how it ended up. But so going in, I was pre-med, and junior year, as many students have the opportunity to do, I was able to study abroad in Denmark, where I took an immunology course and kind of fell in love with that. And so it was kind of history from there. And so that summer, I actually did an internship at a biotech company in Cambridge called Magenta Therapeutics, which was an immunology-based company. So I was able to kind of start learning how immunology research works. And just from there, it just confirmed that's what I wanted to do with my life, was look at immunology in some form. And so I graduated from Vassar in 2019 with my bachelor's in biochemistry. And from there went to work at Massachusetts General Hospital in the research division in the immunology lab. Unfortunately, that lab was not a great fit for me, so I switched over to Dana-Farber at in a lab for immuno-oncology, where I was for 2 years. And actually just 3 weeks ago, started a new job at a biotech company in Lexington, Massachusetts. And I'm hoping to go back to school and get my PhD at some point, hopefully this next coming year. And the area that I'm looking to get my PhD in is hopefully some sort of biomedical science relating to immunology. So.
That's great, and thanks for walking us through the trajectory of the internships too, because I think that's an important topic that we'll try and get to here. Cole, if you can wrap it up. Cole Smith, thanks, 2016 WHS grad. Appreciate you doing the cleanup spot. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for having me. This is a great opportunity. So my name's Cole. I was a 2016 Wellesley High School graduate. I guess that was already said. But I throughout high school was determined to be a chemistry major. I was certain all the way from freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year that I wanted to do chemistry. I took AP chemistry and got like a C-. I took regular chemistry and got like a C+, but I still really wanted to do chemistry. And I got into college, and to absolutely nobody's surprise, I changed out of chemistry. And I actually want to take this time and do just a quick plug. Don't worry about your major very much when you're applying to school, because so many people change their major. I mean, of the panelists that I just heard from, it sounded like at least 3 of us changed our major in college. So it's really, really, really common. I would not stress too much about that. That was one of my biggest fears when I was going into school. I was like, well, at least I know what I'm going to be doing, so I won't be like that. No, I was exactly like everybody else. And it's not something to, be ashamed of. But anyways, I ended up switching to computer science, and this was in my freshman year. It actually took me about a year to switch, so I wasn't a full computer science major until about halfway through my sophomore year. So I've only actually been doing computer science about 4 years as of now, which is, wow, really weird to think about. But anyways, so I taught throughout school, starting at the second half of my sophomore year. I was undergraduate course assistant, and then when I went to graduate school to get my master's, I was a TA and eventually a TO, which is a teaching assistant or associate teacher. Sorry. So that's kind of my experience in school. I was an intern at Amazon over the summer as a solutions architect, cloud solutions architect. This was in 2019, and then I was an intern at Microsoft in 2020. And now I work at Microsoft full-time as a data scientist after getting my master's.
Great, thanks so much. We've gotten questions. Thank you to all who submitted. So we're going to start with those. And I guess, just to engage with our high school audience, I'd love to talk starting with what you all remember back in high school and what was helpful to you. So I guess the question that was asked is, considering where you are now in your field, what do you wish you had done differently in high school and college? And what would you do differently if you were back at WHS right now? And I think that was particularly focused on your participation in both extracurricular STEM as well as any STEM courses, with the acknowledgement that, Forrest, for you, what was offered then is not what's offered now. It is richer. So I thought maybe Billy, if you wouldn't mind kicking that off, and then panelists, if you want to just raise your hand, if you want to jump in next, I will write down who's jumping in and we'll give you an order. So thanks. And I'm going to mute myself, but if you don't mind jumping in, Billy, if that works for you. Or
Sure. I think maybe I'll first start with like the things I had wished I did differently. I think when I was in high school, I was pretty stressed. I did a lot of AP classes, and I felt like I had to take all the hardest classes. Otherwise, I just felt like I had no choice. But I think you always do kind of have a choice. And sometimes you have to know like the limit of your stress or of yourself. And it's like, okay, not to do that. Like your life is not going to be like drastically different, I think. I do think like the AP classes can give you some credit in college, but I don't think it's worth like ruining your life over. And another thing I kind of wish I did differently was I wish I had taken the time to connect more with teachers. I think the teachers at the high school and the middle school are pretty amazing. And I think some of the main things I remember now are just like little quotes from teachers. Like I remember Miss Lopato told our class, break up with the grade and fall in love with learning, which sounds really cheesy now, but made a really big impact on me when I was still in school. And then in terms of like STEM opportunities and extracurriculars, I think I wish I had tried more things. I guess in high school, you have the opportunity to try and just like quit whenever you want. So like, you should just try a bunch of things. If you don't like it, then you can quit and you could try something else that you might like instead. I ended up doing the science team my senior year or the science Olympiad team my senior year, and I kind of wished that I had tried it earlier. Yeah.
that's great. Does anyone else have to add? Taylor, are you?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. So yeah, I definitely also fell under the category of stressed high school student. I took mostly honors and APs, crammed my schedule full of them, while also I was training intensively to be to do ballet, which was 6 days a week, at least 3 hours a day, barely having time to eat dinner, do homework, go to bed. And I think just keeping perspective on everything is really key. I think I would get in my head so much that, oh my goodness, this one test is going to determine my future. It really isn't. And even where you go, even where you end up going to college, because you will get in somewhere, I guarantee you. going to college, where you go to college isn't going to be that important either. As long as you apply, it's what you do with yourself. It's how you apply yourself. So I just kind of wish I had seen that a little more as a high school student. However, I definitely think that the high school STEM classes like really prepared me for college and for beyond college as well. I think that the stress level at Wellesley High School definitely made college, at least at first, seem a lot less stressful than it could have been. I think it's definitely is stressful. I won't say like it's a breeze, but I think it definitely helped be able to manage that. I definitely also agree with Billy to try more things was something that I wish I had done, and connecting with my teachers and just like learning more about STEM, even like research opportunities for high school students. I just saw the other day that because I get blast emails from Brigham and Women's, and they had like this high school program with some local high school. I don't think it was Wellesley High School, but I'm sure that Wellesley High School has similar programs where even for 4 weeks you can come in and just follow someone around in a lab. And I just kind of wish that I had taken the time to kind of slow down and do something like that. But yeah, I'm kind of forgetting what the rest of the question was, so I'm going to stop talking now.
That was great. I asked quite a little bit unfair. I'm going to move on because we do have some great questions. So this is actually a question that was in the chat, which is just now, which is, how do you make good relationships with your teachers in high school? And I guess what I'd like, I know Cole and I presume Forrest from your graduate work, but it's probably some of your others have done teaching. So you could speak both from your own personal experience of even early college students and how they're making relationships with the teacher. I recommend to high school students to connect and do that authentically, as opposed to trying to do it just to get a good grade. So I don't know if Forrest, you'd like to start, and then maybe we move on to Cole if you want to address it, or anybody else. All right, great, thank you.
Sure. So I think this is probably maybe harder to do in high school unless the teacher does additional extracurricular things that you're involved with, but I'll let Cole tackle this from the high school side. In college, this depends a lot. So if you're in a smaller school as a freshman with smaller classes, then you really do have the opportunity to get to know professors better and be an individual. And then the further you progress and the classes get smaller, and especially by grad school, you might even go out to dinner with your professors or whatever, go to them with conferences. So suddenly you're best friends with them practically. Okay, but going back to a freshman in college, if you're in a larger school, or maybe as a freshman, you might have very large classes, right? There could be 100, 200 people in a lecture hall even. Your professor probably isn't going to know who you are, right? Which is very different coming from high school, where of course your teacher knows you. And then in the case of those larger classes, you really want to get to know your classmates, and usually there's some sort of teaching assistant, TA, who you'll interact with more closely. But just being genuine about your interest in the subject is probably the best way to get to know them and develop a relationship with the professor or TA.
That's great. Thanks so much. Cole, do you want to jump in on either the high school or the early college side?
Sure. So I'm actually not sure how much I can do on the high school end, because I actually likewise it's fairly difficult in high school, but I can say, so my college connections were actually made in a 650 person lecture hall. That's how I got started teaching, and just what ended up working for me, and I'm not sure this is applicable general advice, but it's just to give you an idea of there is no one right path. The way that I ended up making the connection with my professor was after the class was over, this was in the intro programming class, I actually went to him and said that the class is bad and this is why, and here's how you can fix it. And he replied with something along the lines of, well, or I said these parts of the class are bad, this is why, here's how we can fix it. And he replied with, well, I'm actually in the process of trying to overhaul this class a little bit. Is that something you'd like to work with me on? And so that's how I got started. But it really is, there is no one right way to do this. And as cheesy as this is going to sound, my advice, if I had to keep it short, is, follow what you're interested in. And if you have a professor that's, doing something that you're interested in, go talk to that professor. Maybe they'll want to do something interesting with one of their students. Oftentimes they have, good reasons to.
That's really helpful. Susan, I think you might have had your hand raised there, so I'd love to include you in this.
Yeah, so for college, every single teacher is going to have office hours. And that's really the time to connect with your college teachers. And probably very few people take advantage of those. So the people who do really stand out. And you don't have to be having trouble with the class. You don't need to be asking for help. This applies to high school and college, but if people become teachers because they're passionate about this subject, and people love to talk about their passions. So in high school, if you can at the end of a class say, hey, is there a day of the week that we can spend 10 minutes after school, and just say I'm interested in chemistry. Can you tell me a little bit about some resource, could you give me any resources of learning what it's like to be a professional chemist or physicist or whatever. In college, all of your professors are going to be doing research and would love to talk to you about their research and about themselves. So just don't be afraid to go and ask them questions.
I just like to briefly say too that, yeah, many professors will have undergrads work on research. So, right, if it's something you're interested in and the professor is doing that work, then definitely talk to them and see if you can get involved with one of their research projects.
Yeah, I think at least for my college, we undergraduate research was a requirement. So it is good to, it's something you have to, they force you to do. But taking your own initiative definitely helps.
That's actually a great transition, and I'm hoping you all can speak to the nature of the school, undergraduate school that you went to. Some of you went to liberal arts oriented schools, others of you went to more like a big public state school, and I'd love to hear a little bit about majoring in a STEM field in a smaller place. So Taylor, maybe you could take that on. And then, Billy, maybe you're at the mid-level at a Vanderbilt, and then, and Susan, also you, and then, a big school such as UC Boulder or UMass. Really love to hear about that. So this one, we might just go around in a circle. So Taylor, if you don't mind starting, and then we'll just go Taylor, Forrest, Susan, Cole, Billy. I'll remind you each. I'll pop in after you're finished. Maybe just take 30, 40 seconds on that one. That'd be really great.
Sure. Yeah. So at Vassar specifically, my biggest class was probably 40 people, which to people who went to bigger schools, that probably sounds like an itty bitty tiny little class. So in terms of classes, I found that there were more students than classes and slots for students they had available. I don't know if that's just a Vassar thing or a liberal arts school thing, but I had a hard time getting into the classes, the STEM classes I wanted to get into. I will say research also, unless you really push for it, is also a little harder to have access to. I actually asked my organic chemistry professor one day after class, hey, have you heard of any professors who are looking for a research assistant? And she said, actually, I am. So, and I also now am in nothing to do with organic chemistry. I kind of really don't like organic chemistry. But it was definitely, that's another thing, like just any type of research, just getting your feet wet, like, that'll be a good jumping off point. But yeah, definitely a liberal arts school, you do get to know your professors a lot better. And they'll get to learn your names, they'll get to learn a little bit of your interests, your strengths and weaknesses. But it is a little bit harder to find research that's relevant to what you're interested in, just because there aren't quite as many resources just due to the size. But again, whatever you do is a good jumping off point for whatever you want to do after. So I wouldn't say that necessarily can hinder you in any way.
That's helpful. Forrest, do you want to jump in and maybe, I don't know the size of Embry-Riddle, so you probably have a good comparison point between it, which is, I'm sure, smaller than Boulder.
Yeah, so I'm at CU Boulder now, which is on the order of 30,000 students. Embry-Riddle in Florida was around 5,000 students. But I actually know very little about undergrads here at Boulder. It's just, there's much more isolation between grad students and undergrads at the large schools. Whereas when I was an undergrad at Embry-Riddle, and I also did a master's there, the whole department, I was in a physics department, everyone knew each other. It was much more closer and people had all sorts of relationships. But unlike Vassar, Riddle was very technical and very focused. So it was fairly easy for undergrads to get research, to be involved with research there. Whereas here at Boulder, yes, there is undergrad research, but I think as a proportion of undergrads, it's much smaller because there's way more grad students, and so all of the grad students are doing research. But of course, regardless of what size school you go to, if you're interested in research, you should look at it. One thing I will quickly comment on is I'm fully surrounded by technical things all the time, and Embry-Riddle was very focused technically. So even as an undergrad, I was just taking technical classes nonstop. And I actually missed the humanities a little bit. I don't think I fully appreciated them in high school, but I didn't realize that until I got to college. And as much time as you spend preparing for STEM in high school, you're really only preparing for freshman year, because after that, you're going to be, doing other things that you didn't get the opportunity to prepare for. But your reading and writing skills and humanities in general are going to be important forever, for the rest of your life. So don't forget about those while you're at high school.
Can I just butt in really quickly there?
Please do. Yeah, that's great.
That is part of why liberal arts school is particularly good in that field. I also felt that way, that I was missing some of my humanities when I had a more STEM-packed class load, and just weaving in a few history classes just that were interesting to me, or a few sociology classes or whatever, I thought gave me a more well-rounded education and helped me in my STEM education as well.
That's great. Susan, do you have, and maybe also your culinary arts school in Cambridge? I've done a few classes there myself. It's fantastic, not in a certificate program, but please throw that in also, because that may be an area of concentration that people would like to go right from Wellesley High into something technical.
Yeah, well, I will add on to Taylor's point, like I am someone who hates writing, and writing is really important in STEM. Like I always thought of science as like a way to get away from there, but you're writing research papers, and you have to have good reading comprehension of like all the journal articles you're reading. So it is still important to take those humanities classes. But so Northeastern might be a little bit weird, but at least for chemistry, they have major specific courses. So organic gen chem and organic chemistry. As a major, I was in a class of about 40 people. It was all chemistry majors. and it was with the department head. So I think it was a very different experience than a lot of people have in Orgo, which I think is really helpful. If you go into college knowing that you want to do chemistry, that definitely helps put you on a good path. Because if like all the biology kids were in those huge lecture hall classes, so being a chemistry major kind of like, it feels like its own college within like Northeastern. So a little bit of a weird experience. And then culinary school, that was, there were only 6 people in my class, so that was very small. It's pretty much all like lab. You're cooking the whole time and eating a lot of sugar. But it's fun. It's definitely it's not as intense as it's not like 4 years. I think it was like a 3-month, 2 days a week class. So it's something that was easy to sort of add into my work schedule.
That's great, and thanks for adding that. As obviously important also, it's kind of the extracurricular learning that you would have done in high school, signed up by often your parents. Let's see, going around in a circle. So Billy, can you just tap into that? I would love to hear that, and maybe even the Reese Curse. This might be a time to just mention Reese Curse and talk a little bit about learning on in an entrepreneurial way.
Yeah, so Vanderbilt, I think, was interesting because 1/4 of the class comes in thinking they want to become doctors, so they're all pre-med. So like the general ed classes like chemistry are just like have so many people in them, and then it kind of thins out. The school is also very research focused, which I think it's like a research first kind of university. So it's pretty easy to find those opportunities. You're kind of there as free labor, so like every professor wants to scoop you up as soon as they can. And then at the Recurse Center, it's a bit different. The environment is like very unstructured. It's entirely self-directed, so there's no set curriculum. It's kind of like the unschooling movement, which maybe is like heretical to say in this WEF call, but maybe not. And yeah, I think in both cases, I think you a lot of the learning you get is from the fellow students or the fellow participants, especially the ones who are like passionate and want to work together on things.
And Cole, maybe you can talk a little bit about UMass, which is, not a huge state school, but also bring in your master's and, maybe contrast what you saw at that level versus the undergraduate level.
Sure. So I actually think I'm a bit of an odd one out in the sense that I did everything I possibly could in college to avoid all of my humanities classes. I wanted nothing to do with them, and I have yet to use any of the skills that I've learned in any of those classes in my career. And I think the primary difference is that I did not choose a research career. And this, I think, is there's a very important difference in a lot of majors, computer science included, and I'm sure Billy can attest to this as well. There are essentially 2 paths. There's the research path and there's the applied path. And Forrest, it sounds like you're going down a bit of a research path. Is that correct?
Definitely.
Yeah. So from my understanding, at least, from what I grasped so far, it sounds like most of the panelists are going down a bit of a research path. And I went down a very different path. I went down an applied path. I don't read papers. I don't write papers ever. I hate reading and writing papers. And so I knew when I was being presented with these options in college, I knew I did not want to go down a research path. And so what an applied path means is that instead of trying to research necessarily new technologies, right? A new way. So I'm in data science, which means I work a lot with machine learning models. So instead of necessarily coming up with, a revolutionary, groundbreaking new machine learning model, I take existing technologies that we already have and apply them to new products, apply them to new places. So, you know, some researcher at some college has come up with a brand new type of model. I take that and I apply it to an existing maybe medical technologies problem that we have, or some other kind of problem. And so, you know, there's a totally equal balance there. You know, some people are going to want to do research, some are going to want to do applied. And so that's something that you may want to be aware of as you're going through, you know, your undergraduate, because I think it will shape what kind of graduate career path you take. But that's a different topic, so I'll table that for now. But yeah, I did as an undergrad, I primarily focused on STEM classes. I got all of my gen eds out of the way in the first year so that I didn't have to take them anymore. And I spent the rest of the time just absolutely packing up on CS courses. I needed about, I think, 60 credits of, so I needed 120 credits to graduate. 60 of them had to be from computer science. I ended up doing 123 credits, and about 80 of them were from computer science, or more. Actually, I think it was closer to like 95. But so if you went to a technology, like a STEM school, a lot of those gen ed requirements, those liberal arts, as Forrest mentioned, are kind of swept off. You don't have to do those. So if that's something that interests you, you know, that's something to be aware of. But as Taylor pointed out, if that, you know, if you feel like you need that in your curriculum, that's something to be aware of as well. So I went to a much larger school. UMass is about 38,000 undergraduates and an additional 10,000 graduate students. So the atmosphere there from an undergrad, trying to find research, and perhaps it's different because this was not a STEM school. This is just a, you know, generic school, but it was borderline impossible for undergraduates to find research positions. And the main reason was, similar to Forrest's case, the grad students are eating them all up. So yes, we are there, as Billy said, as effectively free labor, but the graduate free labor is a little bit better labor than the undergraduate free labor. And so unfortunately, a lot of those research positions are taken by graduates, but that's not to say it's impossible to get it as an undergrad. It's also worth noting that you don't have to do a research position as an undergrad. I never did. As I mentioned, don't like research. I did do a research position actually freshman year as a chemistry major, which we all know how that turned out. But I actually didn't like it. I had a blast working there, and I had a blast talking, you know, working with my lab mates, but I didn't like the type of work. And so I knew that wasn't going to be where I went. So there, you know, having a research position is not vital to your success. But yeah, so for me at a larger school, it was definitely harder. The positions were more limited. And because we had a graduate program applied like in the same school, it made it even more difficult. As a graduate student, finding a research position was significantly easier. If you're a PhD student, it's required. Like you can't get a PhD without doing research, which is why I don't have a PhD. And but as a master's student, it's not required, and you can choose to do it. It may be a little harder to find because it's not required, but I ended up getting a teaching position just because I wanted money. It's also worth noting, by the way, that although we did make the joke about free labor, research positions are sometimes paid as well. So, you know, definitely look into that option if you have it. Money is always better than no money.
Speaking of, most PhDs these days in STEM fields are paid for.
Yes.
You get stipends. So I'm looking again in the immunology field, and yeah, not one of the programs that I looked at do I have to pay a cent. So it's great.
Yep. I can speak from computer science. You should not be paying for a PhD in computer science. For a master's, hopefully you get it for free.
I'd like to jump in, I'm cognizant of time, and we're going to try and wrap this up at about 8:40, just so everybody has a plan.
Oh, okay.
Welcome to the people who have joined in the last half hour. But what I wanted to ask, and it's a compilation of a few questions, is those aha moments when you knew what you wanted to do. So Cole's statement about research versus not, those tracks is an example of an aha moment. But I would also like you to think back to high school when you might have had an aha moment. Maybe it was an inspirational teacher, or maybe you figured out a way to showcase yourself. I know, Taylor, you might want to talk about that for, you know, a woman in STEM position, but something that really triggered for you how you knew that this was what you wanted to do. And Billy, maybe you could address career changing. Susan, also how you honed down within the large field of chemistry down to food science oriented chemistry. And of course, Forrest, it looks like you went from physics to a more narrow field, but once you figured out that satellites were your thing. So I'd love to just hear that personal story from each of you. And just to, let's see, roll the dice here. I feel like I'm the Vanna White of question delivery. So Susan, maybe you could start and talk a little bit about that.
So I think when I was in high school, I think AP Chem was sort of the junior year kind of thing to do. And I wasn't sure, I wasn't really all that interested in chemistry at that point, or my whatever. I wanted to take other courses more. So I actually took it my senior year, which I'm actually really glad that I did, because it was more fresh in my mind for college. But I had Dr. Van Giel for both of my chemistry courses. I don't know. I just really enjoyed it. I think like when the class with the guidance counselor, when we were starting to like explore what we want to do and sort of what is out there, I think I sort of saw food chemistry and I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. I really like to cook. Chemistry is cool. It's sort of puzzly. I like those puzzles. I just kind of went for it. In chemistry, pharma is a big avenue. There's lots of jobs in pharma. So for my first co-op, I sort of just like took what I could get, and very quickly realized that wasn't my thing. I think it's just kind of like you try things out. If they don't work, oh well. It's not like going to ruin your career path. Like you can change majors, you can change your mind. Maybe it'll take an extra semester or whatever, but you'll be fine. You'll get there.
That's great. Does anybody else want to jump in on that one?
Sure. So I kind of always knew that STEM was my thing as well. I always excelled in my math classes, especially. But I found my science classes to be more interesting. Humanities just wasn't interesting in high school to me. Once I got to college, I actually liked it more. But anyway, my mom, I was lucky that my mom worked in biotech. So I kind of had the exposure to that industry through her. And so I was able to see like what making medicine looks like. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And so I guess falling into the field I'm in now, I actually fell into it watching a 60 Minutes episode. You never know where you're going to get inspiration from. They were injecting brain tumors with dead polio virus. And they had some amazing results that they were showing, like absolute eradication of the tumor that they had never seen before. And that kind of clicked in my head. I was like, oh, wow, that's so cool. So I started looking things up. And now, of course, immuno-oncology is a booming field. And it's just, there's so many cool things going on. So yeah, just anything that really like sparks like your interest, just take hold of that, really grasp onto that and dive deeper into that. Yeah.
Great. Anyone else want to, Forrest, you want to jump?
Yeah, so I actually also changed majors, but I applied as aerospace engineering and then switched to engineering physics after my first semester. And it's because I looked at the course catalog and saw the classes I was going to be taking over the next 3.5 years and thought, I don't really want to be an expert in these things. And I really like science, which is why I moved to engineering physics. And it's technically engineering, but there's a lot more science involved. And in my case, it was in a physics department. And I think it's actually hard as a high schooler to really know what these majors are. So even just electrical engineering, there are many different types of electrical engineers, right? Some people do PCB design and circuit design type things, and others are doing signal processing. It's in the same department. So I think as a high schooler, if you're trying to decide between majors, go online and find the course catalogs for the universities you're interested in, and look at the classes you'll be taking and see if they sound interesting to you. I think that's really helpful.
Great advice. I want to get some other good questions in here. So does anybody else have a burning desire to answer that one, or we good? Okay. So another one is, this will be kind of fun to answer, that we as your parents' age group often have advice, and now you get to go out and follow through on our advice or not and kick those tires. And so we would love to hear anecdotes of where the advice really worked out and where the advice you actually found something different worked out. And I'd love you to add in there any kind of advice about summer jobs from all the way from high school into college, because I think that that's something that people like to give advice on, and maybe we're not right about it. So anybody want to start on that one? All right, great. Cole, why don't you go, and next person who wants to go, just raise your hand, but raise it high so I can see it. That'd be great.
Sure. And I'll try and be fast. So the piece of advice that I got was that your grades are cumulative, and so you need to be vigilant starting even freshman year when you're applying to colleges and you're going on a GPA. That GPA is cumulative. It's not just your current semester or your current year. It's going to be your average from your freshman, sophomore, junior year. And so I did not do well my freshman year. I did not do well my sophomore year, and I did pretty well my junior year, but the damage was done. And that did limit me as to my selection of colleges. Ultimately, it didn't matter. I don't think that, the college choice, at least for my field, and I cannot speak to other fields, but I think at least for computer science, it doesn't matter nearly as much as to what school you go to. But that was definitely a piece of advice that I should have listened to more, I think. And the other one is that, as sad as it is, when you're applying to schools, so that's college and beyond college, so a graduate degree, so a master's or a PhD. Unfortunately, the biggest thing that they do look at is your GPA, and it's really frustrating because I wish they would pay more attention to your extracurriculars, and they definitely do pay some, but they do look at your GPA a lot. But jobs care far less about your GPA than they do about your achievements. So you have to keep the GPA-oriented mindset until you're in college, but once you're planning for job, you can kind of drop that a lot.
That's great. Anybody else have a piggyback on that? Susan, that'd be great.
I think for people our age, a lot of our parents are already in well-established career. So you have seen your parents do one thing their whole life. Or my parents have, they graduated college, they worked at one job, and then 15 years later, they switched jobs and they worked there until they're gonna stay there. And it feels like you have to make a decision and stick to it. If you go into freshman year of college as a chemistry major, you have to, that's what you're gonna do for the rest of your life. I saw one of the Q&A questions was when did you know what you wanted to do for the rest of your life? I still don't necessarily, I don't know if this is gonna be my career path for the rest of my life. I might change my mind completely. even now I enjoy my job, but like I have no idea. You can change your mind. If you want to be a doctor, maybe get on that early, but like for the most part, like you don't need a college degree for a lot of jobs, more than you would realize. It's okay to change your mind. Don't worry about it. Don't stress out about it too much.
Yeah,
I'll
anybody-
pick
great. Yeah, please, Taylor, that's great. I want more stories on Don't Stress Out, because I'm a true advocate of that.
Yeah, I mean, kind of in a similar vein. I mean, once you kind of figure out that something isn't for you, you gotta really self-advocate for that. I have had a lot of experience in my career development where I kind of thought I was waiting on people or waiting on things to fall into my lap or to happen on their own. And they often don't. Unfortunately, that's just the way the world works. So I guess my biggest piece of advice is don't be afraid to speak up for yourself and really self-advocate and really push people. If there's something that you want, go for it. If there's something you don't like, speak out about it. So just as an example for me, like I mentioned, I started off in a lab after graduating from Vassar at Massachusetts General Hospital. I hated it there, absolutely hated it there. Part of it was the lab itself, but part of it is the environment of an academic research environment, at least as a non-undergraduate, a non-graduate student, like as a paid like research tech, it just didn't feel right. And so, and I knew that, and I gave it 3 months, and after 3 months, nothing was changing. And so I switched, and it's a little better, and now I switched again and I'm much happier. So yeah, again, like when you find something that you like, go that way. Don't just wait for things to fall in your lap.
I just want to jump in for 2 seconds. I answered a question through text and it moved it to the answered column. It's about your GPAs. If you all are comfortable answering that, please just hop in there and answer that. I don't want to be the only person that answered that one.
Are we talking high school GPA?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. And maybe if you get in there, you'll just see that there are tabs across the top. So that's for everybody who wants to go and see those answers. And I wanted everybody to know that this is going to be put up on YouTube, so that you will be able to share it with friends who weren't able to be here today, as well as sharing it, just going back and referring to it. I think we've got time for one more question if we all delve into that. I think a lot of this is that trajectory of how do you know what you're gonna like? And what I'd really like to talk about is how did you all meet the people, and who if you want to share, don't have to share names, but just anecdotes of the people that helped you move towards where you are now. And a big question I have is serendipity. Was it something that you stumbled into, or was it calculated and purposeful? So how much of it is luck? How much of it is what, Taylor, you were just talking about, the dogged pursuit when you have an interest? Because I would assume that we have a lot of college, high school students who at this point don't yet quite have an interest formulated, and they may stumble on some interesting stuff. So I'd love to have each of you really showcase where the stumbling has worked out for you, in addition to where you've been purposeful. Thank you.
I'll just be really quick because this kind of related to my last comment. I was at my internship at that biotech company. I had a boss who I didn't particularly think was all that great, and he wasn't doing much. And I was like, you know what, I want to learn more. So I kept saying, I want to go to someone else. I want to learn more. Like, I'll do stuff with him, but I want to learn with someone else. And the person who they plot me with, I'm still in contact with now, and she's helped me find jobs and stuff and helped me find resources. And like, I babysit her kids sometimes. So like, again, for me, I think part of it is, yes, you have to advocate for yourself, but the other part of it is just the luck of the draw with who you fall into line with, and yeah, who you're around.
I'll be fast here as well. So For me, when I was in college, I was originally a chemistry major. One of the required classes for chemistry was to take introductory computer programming. I'm not sure why, but whatever. So as I was actively flunking out of chemistry, I was doing really well in computer programming. So that's what drove my career switch. Later, when I was applying to internships, I applied to Amazon and got rejected. And so I applied to a different position at Amazon and got accepted. And that's how I ended up doing cloud architecture. Really, really liked that. And then, yeah, that's basically it. So the point is, pretty much everything for me has been kind of an accident, but it's been a lot of fun. Like I like to think of it as like if I'm if life is a river and I'm on a raft, I have an oar I can steer, but I certainly can't completely fight the river.
That's great. I saw some more nods. Forrest, do you want to just, or any advice to high schoolers as we're wrapping up?
Sure. I mean, I can echo what Taylor and Cole said, right? You can't control luck, but you can take initiative. So if things aren't working out or you're not happy, just try something else and do jobs of all kinds, summer jobs, apply to internships. Even as a freshman, it's a little bit harder then because you're competing with upperclassmen, but just the practice of going through applications matters and helps a lot. And take jobs at school as well. Maybe you're not doing research, but maybe you're a grader or something like that, just so you interact with professors and you get a different perspective on academics. And even the small amount of money you'll be paid can make a difference.
Yeah, I think someone who is eager but has worse grades is going to stand out more than someone who has a 4.0 but just kind of like shows up to class and then leaves. Like your teachers will know you better and they'll be willing to take risks on you if you're eager, if you're showing up, if you're showing initiative and you're trying to learn.
I'll try to jump in real quick. There's this one quote I love from Steve Jobs that he gave in his 2005 commencement speech. It's you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking back. And I feel like that's been pretty true in my life. I think a lot of times I had some idea of where I wanted to go. Like I wanted to go to school to do engineering, to build things, to help people. But the way I originally intended that through biomedical engineering kind of switched. And I think that happened a bit serendipitously and not entirely intentionally, but I'm happy with the way it happened.
That's great. Anybody else on that? Terrific. I do want to mention to everyone, including our panelists, you might be interested, that Monday, April 26th, so that's the Monday we all get back from vacation, or at least the high school students get back from vacation. We as WEF are running a program called What Happens to Your Saliva Sample each week, because as you know, the students drop saliva samples in the door when they come into school in the mornings in their cohorts. That's Monday, April 26th at 6:30 p.m. The reason I'm really suggesting this is as a career coach, there are many ways to get an experience of a job. And it is a very rare opportunity to go inside a lab because there's so many protocols to keep that lab safe, both from a biohazard standpoint as well, or any kind of hazard standpoint, as well as security and intellectual property. So here's your big chance to get a tour of Miramis, and that is the lab testing partner that we are partnering with for the district. And you'll see the science behind the pool testing with the founder, CEO, Dr. Prem Sarut, and she's the founder. So just it's going to need an RSVP. You'll be receiving something after the panel so that you can sign up, but I just really recommend it because it is very unusual to be able to get in-depth tours of labs. So that will be a cool thing. I'm certainly going to make time for that for myself. And then it's 8:40. So I would love it if we could go around and just 1 10-second, attaboy, good job to high school students and what you think that they need to carry with them as they go forward. What helped you? What do you think about when you don't know what you're doing and or when you are at a crossroads? So that would be just a great way to end. And I won't come back on, but I'm Julia Hicks DePeister, and I really thank everybody for participating, both our participants, everybody who put something in the chat and the QA, and of course our panelists. Thanks so much for that. So let's see, Susan, if you don't mind kicking that off, we'll go around the circle. Susan, Billy, Cole, Taylor, and Forrest, I'll have you back clean up.
Okay, I guess what I would take away is don't stress. You're going to be fine. You don't need to go to like what college you go to in the end, like all these little these feel like big decisions. They're gonna feel like really tiny decisions in a couple of years. And then also, like, if you're confused, if you're struggling, like, you'd be really surprised how willing people are to help you. So don't be afraid to ask for help or advice or guidance or anything.
I guess one thing I think we've been focusing a lot on is preparing for your future, but I think it's also important to make the most of your time at the high school. There's this one line that Mr. McCullough would always say, carpe the heck out of the diem, and I think I could not agree more. Yeah, just make the most of the opportunities you have and trust yourself.
Oh, sorry, I'm next. My apologies. My takeaways would very similar to what Susan said. Don't stress the small things, even if they seem like big things. And yeah, don't forget to plan for the future financially. And I know that that's not what the topic of this discussion is, but starting your retirement savings early can be very important too. Starting a lot of this stuff, when you think about it, can be important. So just think about it. Take a personal finance class in college.
Something that I've had to remind myself constantly, and something that I definitely realized in my first year of college, is that as Wellesley high school students, we come from a place of extreme privilege. Like the level of education of some of my colleagues in school and in other situations that come from other public schools is just, it's astonishing how different it is. So just know that all this hard work you're putting in is so, like, it's going to set you up for success if you only are able to like tap into it and actually use it to your advantage. Don't take advantage of it. Yeah.
So much time and effort and stress is being spent right now by all of you in high school, working up towards college, but it doesn't end when you get there. So that means a couple of different things. First, college will still have its own stressful aspects, and you'll have to be worrying about things that aren't just homework or applying to a job or something, but you'll have to worry about basic life things like laundry or finances. But it also means you get to keep working at it, right? College is just a beginning as well. So as has been said previously, you're working hard now. And yeah, it's inevitable there will be some stress, but you're going to forget about it in a couple of years. You might be stressing about new things, but you always have the opportunity to improve. So
that's great. thanks to Wellesley Education Foundation, and we'll be getting out communication. So thanks so much for joining this evening. Take care.
Thank you.